GOAT status is not achievable in this era of boxing. I'm going to say it again. GOAT status is not achievable in this era of boxing. Okay? There's a lot of talk back and forth about GOATs and who's good and who's the greatest of all times. And I don't care what division you're talking about. I don't care if it's heavyweight, welterweight. I don't care what you're talking about. Nobody in this era is eligible for GOAT status and probably will never be as long as boxing is currently like this. How can you justifiably say that? You have to understand that these boxers of the yesteryears, who you guys want to compare boxers of today with, the reason why you can't do that is because the boxers of the yesteryears, you're talking about them, a group of boxers who competed in an era where the best fought the best consistently. Let me say that again. They fought in an era where the best fought the best consistently. When you go back in time, what do you find? There's always ducking, but there's less of it. Everything that's bad that goes on in boxing currently today, back in the day, it was less of it. Whatever it is you're talking about, it was less of it. And how could you compare any fighter in this era and try to put them at GOAT status when they competed in the era where something like franchise champion exists? That's the nail in the coffin right there. I'm pretty much done with the conversation, okay? You fought in the era in which franchise champion existed. Not only that, as far as boxing, but let's single out the heavyweight division. This is the weakest the heavyweight division has ever been in history. Nobody can deny that. Nobody can argue that. There's no going back and forth. Okay? It's futile. Okay? This era of boxing is nowhere near stacked. It doesn't nowhere near have the bodies or the level of competition, nor does it contain the mentality of the fighters of the yesteryears, nor do they even fight the same rounds. You talk about 15, 20 rounds. Some of these guys that you reaching back to compare to some of these modern fighters, you talk about 15, 20 rounds these guys fought. It's a different time. It's a different class. It's totally different. I can't elevate you to no GOAT status when you're, all right, we all know in boxing, you only as good as your competition. You're only as good as your dancing partner. This era doesn't have the dancing partners to even solidify anybody of being any kind of GOAT. The best you can be in this era is the best in your era. That's it. Don't even turn your head and talk about the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, or anything. Don't even talk about that. Don't even talk about it. Because the level of competition, the mentality, how boxing went, and the best fighting the best was way more consistent. Fights was way more entertaining. There was way more engaging. Fights was non-stop action-packed back then. Now it's too much posturing going on. It's too much bullshit. Just go watch any of Leonard's fight. Go watch any of the Four Horsemen fights and compare that to any modern fight that you see today. What is one thing you're going to notice? The pacing is different. The level of action is different. Okay? The exchanges is different. People stayed in the pocket more and threw more fire on a high IQ level. You know, those guys was just in a different time. Tough. And you want to know why you could say this? We can even back this up to human science. Let's use that. For the same reason, your testosterone is nowhere near as higher as your great-great-grandfather. And your great-great-grandfather testosterone is nowhere near of his grandfather. Just like my son, his testosterone levels are not going to be nowhere near mine is. Because for as long as they have been tracking it, male testosterone has been going down throughout the years. Okay? That alone to tell you that you're not dealing with the same kind of caliber of man, fighter, opponent that you did back then. That alone will tell you that. We don't compare to the fighters of yesteryears, man. We just don't. Yeah, we would like to. I mean, it sounds cute, but in all actuality, there's no comparison. Different breed, different time, way more tougher. A whole bunch of other shit. The only thing that increased in this era is the money. That's it. But that's why nobody of this era can actually achieve GOAT status, because the environment is not even terraformed for that. Okay? It's not even terraformed for that. Boxers quit on their stool a lot more now than they ever did. Rounds are shorter now. Not only that, the referee is most likely to stop a fight nowadays before a fighter is just flat out knocked out more than any other time. Nowadays, when you see a guy get knocked out, it's rare that he gets the full 10 count if he's showing, you know, if he's doing what Dylan White has done. Like, I think it was cool for that ref to let Dylan White get to his feet to let the whole world see that he couldn't compete anymore. Nowadays, fights are being stopped sometimes prematurely, sometimes too early, and sometimes fights are being stopped for the fighter to take any further embarrassment or punishment. Also, you're dealing in an era where they have branding clause within the contract to make sure the fight gets stopped before the branding of the fighter is damaged even further. That means in the contract, it's set up for the referee to stop the fight before the boxer gets put in any more of an embarrassing position, which would damage his brand and further making future revenue. That's what era these guys compete in. This is why GOAT status in this era is not attainable. It's not. I don't care who you want to bring up. I don't care what division you want to talk about. These are just the facts. Period. So GOAT status is fictional. It's not real. Nothing's real about it. Nobody can get that in this era because this era is too weak. It's too soft. It doesn't have the level of competition. There's too many much more ways to duck now. And guys are just simply, the best don't want to fight the best anymore. That's what we're all arguing and fighting about in boxing. Not getting the fights we want to see. Do you think it was this hard back in the day? Yeah, a little bit, but the fights definitely got made faster. People definitely wasn't afraid to fight each other. People definitely wasn't afraid to lose their O. And that's another thing. These guys is fighting in the era where they're afraid to lose. So how you going to try to compare that to the fighters of the yesteryears? It's preposterous. It's insane. There's no comparison. The best you could do is be the best fighter in your era. But nobody can scratch the surface of the old legends. Sorry. It's just not happening. Okay? Because back in the day, it was 3 or 4 George Foremans versus today of one Deontay Wilder. It was about 3 or 4 George Foremans. 5 and 6 George Foremans. Real, certified, legit, heavy-handed, high IQ threats. It's not that in boxing. The heavyweight division is super duper small. Like I said, the heavyweight division is old. It's old. It's an old ass division. It's old. Ain't no young meat up in the heavyweight division. So if it doesn't have the same traffic, the same amount of bodies, it doesn't have the same mentality, they ain't fighting the same rounds, they're not fighting on the same competitive level or none of that, how the fuck can you compare that to anybody, to any kind of GOAT status? It just doesn't make no sense at the end of the day. And everything I said is 100% logical. It 100% makes sense. You know, there's absolutely no denying it. I didn't lie about anything. I didn't fabricate anything. And most importantly, every fucking thing I said and every point I bring up makes total sense. There's no stretching. There's no reason. Everything that I said is reasonable to say. And all of it is true. So that's why GOAT status for anybody in this boxing era, I'm sorry, it's not achievable. Until we start showing reflections of what the fighters went through and faced back in the day, then you can say that. But since a boxer is only good as their competition, then that's the end of the story right there. And the level of opposition is just not out there. It's just not out. It is in some divisions, but not in all divisions. Not in all divisions. And in an overall in boxing, it's nowhere close. I'm out.